Dr. Cornel West is back on the show. Dr. West, welcome back.
Oh, my dear sister, it's always a blessing and a joy for me to be on your show. You're always so kind to me, but you and I know this is the 130th anniversary of the birth of Marcus Garvey. Marcus Messiah Garvey. Oh, I love his love of black people. He said, the world has made being black a crime. I intend to make it a virtue. Disorganization is the major challenge of black people. As long as black people live in America, the vast majority will live lives of ruin and disaster. Garvey's been right on all three of those. Now, I'm not a Garveyite, but I love my Garveyite brothers and sisters because of his deep love of the people. And I want to salute your love for black people, your love of oppressed people, your courage, your commitment, and your willingness to take a risk day in and day out. You should know it's not unnoticed by people all around the country and the world. And I say that in the name of your precious grandmama and your parents and your loved ones and your family who go hand in hand with the shaping and making of who Sister Sabby is.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. West. So you reached out because, from what I understand, you saw the video that I made about the conversation between yourself and Norm Finkelstein about shunning the students on campus that's supporting Israel. And you reached out and you wanted to come on and I guess explain your position. So the floor is open.
Oh, you so kind. No, my precious wife, Anahita, we sit there and watch you and always, marvel at your moves. And I say, oh, my dear sister got a deep disagreement with me. I hope I get a chance to try to clear it up. Because the important thing, in a sense, is a certain kind of defense of a grandmother being shaped by the church, being shaped by a Christian sensibility, in which you say, I believe that any form of hatred is a form of slavery. It's a form of bondage. That you get tied into the worst of who we are as a human being, because we're wretched and wonderful at the same time. So the question becomes then, how do you become a free person in love, a loving person tied to freedom? And therefore, I, in many ways, didn't disagree with you when you were talking about how there's just certain folk that you got to keep a distance from, because gangsters are gangsters and thugs are thugs, and you got to be able to work in the world and to negotiate and navigate yourself in the world in such a way that you're able to thrive. I mean, Garvey talked about self-defense, self-determination, but the first thing is what? Self-respect. Absolutely. So what people were saying, well, Wes is talking about saying we ought to go around here and hugging baby killers. No. Ain't no way. I'm the one who's being hunted by the Klan. I'm the one living under death threat. I ain't no fool. But am I a Christian? Hell yes. What does that mean? That means that even the folk who hate me, I hate their deeds and still try to stay in contact with their humanity. I don't spend that much time and energy on hating them. I'm trying to do all I can to sustain myself. And I'm not a pacifist like Martin King. No, not at all. Just like, I don't know if you can see my dear sister here, Harriet Tubman, with her Bible. Was she a pacifist? No, she had Bible and a gun at the same time when she went back into the belly, right? Absolutely. So self-defense, absolutely. But I do believe that it's very important that we don't give people license and permission to just go about either hating or even shunning. As a professor, I'm going to shun students who I disagree with. I'm going to talk about genocide of Palestinians. I'm going to talk about ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. I'm going to talk about mass incarceration of black people. I'm talking about corporate greed and predatory activity of capitalists and so forth, because I believe I'm speaking the truth. But I want to be free to speak the truth, motivated by love, and recognizing in the end that we're cutting so radically against the grain.
So I think, so what I gather from that conversation, I didn't get the impression that Norm Finkelstein was saying you should hate them. But I do think there's a difference between hating someone and shunning them, right? So you mentioned that you want to see their humanity. So it sounds like to me you want to try to see the good in people. And I think for me, I don't see any good with that. No good in Israel at all. Shama Sawant was on the show not too long ago. We had a similar discussion. And I said that I do not think that we should see if there's any type of humanity in Israel, because there just isn't. The majority of Israelis, the polls are showing they don't want the Palestinian people there. Then there's another poll that shows also majority feel that they want them out of Gaza and they want the land, right? So I think that there's a difference between I hate people and I am shunning them. I think at this point, anybody who is supporting what Israel, what the IDF is doing in Gaza, and majority do support it, including those students on the campus, yes, they should be shunned, because they need to know that we do not approve of what they're doing. I think otherwise we just go about business as usual. And I look at everything that we have been doing. We have been protesting for almost 2 years, over 2 years now, right? Like people have been writing letters, although I don't think writing letters really does anything, but people have done as much as they can do. Chris Smalls just got back from the Freedom Flotilla. You know, he was willing to risk his life, put himself in danger. He was beaten by the racist IDF in Israel. I do not think that we should give them any room to have any type of humanity. I think that in this particular situation, especially when it comes to Israel, I don't think there is any good. I think there's no good there at all. And sometimes I think that's just the case. So I think that when Norm said that, you know, those students should be able to shun them, I agree that they should be shunned. And I feel like, and you know, feel free to jump in here, but I feel like Dr. West, I feel like you want to see the good in people, even when there's a possibility that they're just wrong, that these are just hateful people. And these are not my brothers. And I understand that you're a Christian. I grew up in the church too, but they're not my brothers. They're not my sisters. And I think they do need to be shunned at this point in time.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your strong points, my dear sister, and I appreciate the fact that you're just so for real, you know, and I think that's very important, because when you're in a conversation like this, the same was true with Brother Norm, who I have great respect for, and I got deep love for, but he and I got disagreements, but I know he's for real. You know what I mean? There's no posing and posturing. Same with you. You are for real. You speak from your heart, mind, and soul. And there's a power in your insight. First thing to keep in mind, that you see, when you call somebody a brother or sister, you're not calling them, for me, a comrade. You see, as a Christian, all you are saying is that that person is made in the image of a God, that they have chosen to be gangster. So it's not the good in them, it's their potential to change. That's what you're affirming, is their potential to change. And that's true for anybody. You see, anybody. I've been blessed to teach in prison since 1970, beginning with Norfolk, where Martin was, when Malcolm was in 1970. And the same is true in Rawwood just a few years ago with Chris Hedges and others. And there's some brothers in there who've done some things that's gangster-like, but they have the potential to change. And it's that potential that I affirm, not because I'm holding my breath. If you're dealing with genocide sponsors, genocide enactors, you don't hold your breath. Why? Because they are, and this is where I think we might have a deep disagreement, my sister. When you say they have no humanity, I think you might mean they're not humane. When they are killing innocent babies, which is sick and pathetic and gangster and barbaric, that is part of their humanity. We humans are wretched creatures. When the Klan lynched our people, when Trump himself, with his Klans-like elements supporting him, and he himself expressing the white supremacist sensibilities that he has, that's part of his humanity too. To be human is to be wretched, and it is to be wonderful. So it's not as if Israel doesn't have any humanity. Israel expressing the wretchedness of humanity in the form of a vicious genocide. And you're right, we seem to be powerless because it has not yet been stopped. That is a colossal failure on behalf of international law, on behalf of the of humanity as a species. Yes, that's true. But I think it's not that I believe somehow there's good there. There's a potential to for people to change. That's what I'm holding on to as a Christian and as someone who is trying to resist.
So I think that, and I want to compare the two, right? So
Sure,
when we talk
sure.
about people having the potential to change, at any point in time, if Israelis in Israel want to walk away from the Zionist ideology, want to walk away from that hateful rhetoric and teaching that the Palestinian people are not human, calling them animals, uh, taking their homes in the West Bank, they can do so. They can even leave Israel if they want to get away from all of that. The Palestinian people cannot leave Gaza. They are trapped, they are caged in. At any point in time, any of them in Israel could have spoken out and can still speak out against what is happening to the Palestinian people. They don't want to because they don't want them there. So I've been a firm believer in people being able to change as well. When this comes to this
Sure.
particular situation, they are not making any efforts or any type of moves to show that they want to change, to show that, okay, maybe I want to listen to the other side. They don't. And to prove my point, you have Ethiopians that also live in Israel. The Ethiopians in Israel have decided to go along with the oppressors and the occupation so that they're not beneath the Palestinians, even though they're not on equal footing as the Israelis either. They are willing to kill the Palestinian people so that they aren't lower than them, even though Israel has come in and Israel sterilized Ethiopian women against their will so that they could not continue to reproduce. It's very clear there's racism towards them as well. Chris
Absolutely.
Smalls made it very clear when he came onto the show that when he was in the prison, he said most of the people that he saw that was locked up in there were Ethiopians and Filipinos, which was a new one to me.
Mm,
But it's very clear. This is a genocidal, oppressive, hateful state. And the way that I see it, if at any point in time they wanted to change, they could have walked away from that a long time ago. They don't want to. And I think for me, it's just I'm done. And I just I'm sorry to say it this way, but I'm very, very firm about this. I cannot be willing to believe that they have some type of humanity because they don't. And it's just when they could have said something even before October 7th, when they were stealing people's homes in the West Bank, when they were burning houses down and taking their land. They said nothing. They watched and they let it happen. They cheered it on. So I don't think there's any humanity there with them. And I think that what we need right now at this point in time, we need a radical form of politics that is not afraid to go up against the Zionist entity, that is not afraid to shut it all down. This is not a kumbaya moment. And I know that you like to look for love and peace and things, but at this point in time, I would say it's love and peace that got us in this direction. Israel should have been shunned a long time ago. JFK had the right idea when he said that he wanted to question this nuclear weapons that they were building in Israel, when he wanted to push back against that. I just think that now is not the time for that. Now is not the time to say, let's sit back and see if they want to change. Now is the time to shun Israel for what it is. And anybody who believes in that Zionist rhetoric, I think that's what we need. We need a radical form of politics. I said the same thing right now with Zoran Mandami. He ran saying one thing and now he's starting to backpedal too, because even Bernie Sanders came to him and told him cooling on the Israel rhetoric. There is a genocide taking place. And I keep hearing all these people trying to make excuses for what is happening. I keep hearing people trying to make it seem like Israel, that we should give some type of support towards this genocidal state. And the reality is, this is not just a Netanyahu issue. It's Zionism. It's the teachings. It's what they believe. It's what they want. And from my experience, what I have learned is that even if you say, okay, well, let me try to talk to them, which people have done, Max Blumenthal has done, right? Professor Morandi has done. They've tried these things over and time again in the past to try to get them to understand what you are believing is a racist, supremacist ideology. They don't want to hear it.
No, I hear what you're saying, but first I want to be very clear. The one that I am in no way calling for a kumbaya moment
It
whatsoever.
it feels like it.
Well, it shouldn't feel like it. I don't see what kind of evidence it is. You see my voice, my body, my time, my energy, raising voices with all kind of threats coming at me for the last 10 years, and you call that kumbaya? There's no way in the God's heaven that's kumbaya. None whatsoever. The kumbaya is thinking that somehow the only way of talking is having some nice little Thanksgiving dinner together. That's kumbaya. When somebody's out there taking risks, cutting against the grain, raising their voices, when I'm the advisor for the Student for Justice in Palestine at Harvard, just like I was for the Kuumba singers, right? And I'm here, I see all the racist remarks of black students. I go to the administration and say, I want more protection for the black students. I don't get too much. That we can't even find a room at Harvard for the Palestinian students, fighting for the Palestinian students. And then, of course, once the encampments are there, I'm there. And then it's the Jewish students who get the privilege for protection. I say, no, this is sick. This is hypocrisy, not simply as in the abstract, but because I've seen it for myself as an activist, as a participant. That's not kumbaya at all, my dear sister. Don't confuse talk about love with somehow it being a kumbaya, a strategy to fighting for justice. Fighting for justice means you put your body on the line the way you do and many others, but don't think that somehow kumbaya means you're not putting your body on the line. You're not speaking the truth. You're not pursuing justice with every bone in your body, every fiber in your body. No, not at all. I mean, or we can put it this way. Let's put it this way, that look at the history of black people in terms of 90-some% of white folks supporting slavery. Now, do you think Frederick Douglass was kumbaya just because he was a Christian and he was calling for love tied to justice? No, they got a bounty on his head. You think Ida B. Wells Barnett was a Christian and she's calling for kumbaya? No, they got a bounty on her head against Jim Crow, right? So that kumbaya does not mean, talking about love does not mean kumbaya at all, but it's still different. And here I disagree with you. When you say there's no humanity where people are oppressing folk, I think you downplay just how vicious human beings have been and are to each other. They're still humans when they do that. They're not humane, I agree, but they're still humans. If you read out of humanity all of the people who have participated, been complicitous with structures of oppression, there's not too many left, my dear sister. Not at all.
But that's the point. That's the point, Dr. West. And this is where the whole allyship comes in. And this
Yes,
is something I had to learn. Like, I had to learn this myself. I used to
yes.
believe, and I've said it before on the show multiple times, I used to believe, like, no, we could just work with anybody and figure all that other stuff out later. I used to believe that. But then I had my own experience with that. And what I understand is people have to come correct. One of the things that I learned from the Black Panthers, from Fred Hampton in particular, when he decided to collaborate with the Young Patriots, with the Young Lords, in particular with the Young Patriots, he told them that they had to denounce their racist ways first. And not everybody agreed. Not everyone in the Young Patriots was on board for that. Not everyone in the Black Panthers was on board, from what I understand, with this coalition building. So some people left, right? But
That's
the point that Fred Hampton made is that how are you have to have some type of respect for me as a person.
yes.
And they don't have respect for the Palestinian people. They don't have respect for, and we showed it on this show. They don't have respect for Black people either. And what I'm saying is, I think, and when we look back through history, if we wanted to compare the two, if we looked at Martin Luther King and we looked at Malcolm X, when I was younger, when I was growing up, I was taught that Martin Luther King had the right ideology and he was the peaceful one and that was the way to go. But as I got older and I did my own research, I look back on things and I realized that I think Malcolm X had the right ideology. And even Martin Luther King later on started to realize maybe I didn't go about it the right way. Maybe the peaceful idea was not the thing to do. Martin Luther King believed that even the people were sitting up there and bashing them in their heads, sicking dogs on them, hosing them down. And he believed we got to do this in a peaceful way while they were getting the crap beaten out of them. And Malcolm X took a different strategy. And I do believe this is why in schools we were taught that Malcolm X was militant and his strategy was not the right one. But in the end, Malcolm X, he was trying to tell people, no, like we are at a point right now where we need radicalism. I just do not feel like trying to find a way to look for humanity in people who are pro genocide is going to get us in the right direction that we need to go in. And I feel like we have moved in a way to try to be peaceful. And I feel like it hasn't really gotten us far. And that is my big concern. How did we get here? How did we get here to this point where Israel is allowed to do what they do, where they're allowed to genocide a whole group of people, even though the world protested against it? How did we get to this point?
Well, we got to this point because we didn't have strong enough progressive and courageous people who had strong enough organizations, and you had gangsters in status quos that were willing to kill them and assassinate them and crush their organizations because they had more power. So that's true for how did we get to the point of fascism in America? It's the same thing. We haven't had enough people who've been able to come together and organize and be strong enough in the face of the gangsters and thugs who have police and guns and bombs and propaganda in their educational systems, and find complicity in the mainstream media that don't want to tell the truth, so that it becomes difficult to be victorious. I mean, that we can tell a larger story, but that's the sketch of the story there. But that has nothing to do, again, with kumbaya, though. You see, I mean, Martin King and Fannie Lou Hamer, who were not just Christians, but had a strong love ethic. It begins not with love of the enemy. It begins with love of your own people. And in any conception of love of the enemy is recognizing they are human beings because they have greed, because they have hatred, and acknowledge that Black folk, we ourselves, also have greed and hatred in us. That when your mother in church talked about love everybody, she wasn't talking just about these white supremacists. Sometimes she was talking about the sister on the other side of the church who was mistreating her. Because they could be mean. Black folk could be full of greed. Black folk could be full of hatred with each other. When Fred Hampton was talking about white allies, he also knew he had black spies from the FBI on the inside facilitating his killing, right? So that's what humanity is. The fact that we all are struggling with greed, with hatred, and for Black folk with self-hatred because of the power of the white supremacy that's been drilled into us, and we have to find counter strategies that push that fear, push that white supremacy out of us, so that when you juxtapose Martin and Malcolm, actually, I'm with you. I agree much more with Malcolm X because I'm not a pacifist. Martin King means the world to me, but I'm not a pacifist. He was. Tutu and I were right there in South Africa at the funerals where we were being shot at. He was a pacifist too. I'm not a pacifist, but I am a Christian. So I believe in self-defense. I believe in just war. When Mandela founded Spirit of Nation, what did he say? We must move into a violent form of resistance, but they were killing what? Mainly they were attacking property, and if they attacked anybody, it was combatants. It was not civilians. Why? Nelson Mandela also happened to be a Christian. People don't talk about that, but he was. He and I talked about that when we met, and I gave the Mandela lecture in 2006. So it's not a question of Martin versus Malcolm. Somehow Martin was kumbaya or peaceful at all. He was a pacifist, so he did not believe in killing, but he was fighting intensely, and he knew they were trying to kill him. Malcolm, never a pacifist, but early on, Malcolm said what? No white folk at all will ever be allies. Even John Brown, they said, nope, no way. He changed his mind. How come? He's forever growing and wrestling and maturing in his own way. But what's beautiful about both of them? They loved us. They were willing to die for us. That's something we should never forget, because no matter what color people are, there's only a slice of people who love like that and who are willing to die for us. I agree with you about what's going on in New York. Brother Chris Smalls, who's my dear, dear brother. You've probably seen some of my social media on him. And I just did a thing on what me and Tavis' show, the Smiley West show that we do every Monday and Thursday. And here he is risking his life, and yet he's a hero to Bernie and AOC, and he can't hear a mumbling word from them. That is sheer cowardliness on behalf of Brother Bernie and Sister AOC. They're cowards when it comes to some of these fundamental issues, and you see how hollow certain dimensions of their progressivism really, really is. And is there a chance of Soran being pushed to the center? Well, all this talk with Obama and Axelrod showing up and all the Obama followers now flocking to him, it looks like he could easily be just another version of AOC in terms of making his way into the power precincts and beginning to adjust to injustice. We got to keep him accountable. Absolutely right. There's no doubt about that. But that's not a question at all, again, of a kumbaya sensibility connected with myself. I mean, I know I'm accenting this because you use that language, and it really kind of gets me fired up, because if I understood my life as kumbaya, I would have far less wounds and bruises and scars. Believe me.
It's the brother and sister thing, right? Like it's
the language itself.
Yeah, it's the brother and sister thing. But I do want to get back to the panel, because Norm Finkelstein, the question he was asking is if those students should shun the pro Israel students, and there was a disagreement there between the two of you, and I think a lot of people have covered this. A lot of people covered that conversation, but there was a disagreement there between the two of you, and from what we gathered, it appeared to us that you were saying, no, you shouldn't shun them, because then you end up becoming like you end up behaving like the oppressors.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Well, again, it's the question of what kinds of shunning we're talking about. And he and I talked about this. See, as a professor, I know I'm going to have a variety of different kinds of students in my classes. So, for example, if I have a Zionist in my class as a student, should I shun that student because they are Zionists? I say no, not at all. When your students are in your class, they come from a variety of different ideologies. When I first arrived at Harvard and Princeton, if I shunned the white supremacists, it would be a very, very small group I ever interact with. We ain't even talk about male supremacists in this regard. But will I speak my mind in terms of Zionist ideology generating this kind of genocide? Of course I will. Generating this kind of ethnic cleansing? Of course I will. Will I bite my tongue when I talk about the apartheid policies of the Israeli state? Of course I'll speak that truth, and the Zionist student would be right there. But I'm not that different than shunning. You speak your truth, then you say, well, let's hear what kind of counter arguments people have. That's a particular context in which voices need to be brought together for a serious kind of critical discussion.
But Norm was talking.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, but I think you're speaking about yourself as a professor. Norm was talking about the other students.
The other students. Right. Oh, I see. Well, I mean, the thing is, I told him, he asked me quite explicitly, he said, well, would you shun baby killers? I said, well, I wouldn't just shun them, but I could lose my Holy Ghost and actually go about crushing them, but in the name of Jesus, but I know I wouldn't be acting Christian, because I'm a human being too. I got gangster in me. I got hatred in me. I've got proclivities that I ought to have more control over, but I know I don't. So if I were a student rather than a professor, would I shun certain folk who justified killing babies? I wouldn't spend time with them. No, not at all. Would I engage them if they wanted to? Well, sure I would. That's why I disagreed. I told them I think there is a sense in which I don't really view shunning as part of my way of life. I like to interact with a variety of different folk, but I'm very clear about where I stand. And if they have a strong critique of it, I want to hear what it is, and I will respond. So I still disagree with him in that sense, even though, of course, he and I agree on a whole host of things when it comes to his critiques of imperialism and capitalism, and his love of W.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson and Paul Sweezy and a number of towering friends, Annette Rubinstein and Stanley Aronowitz and a host of others.
So I would not engage with them. And I think this is where the disagreement is. Right now, we are looking at laws being put on the books to make communication, social media more challenging, all because the ADL has put, I guess, this out there into the ether. They are basically making it so that now, and this is what I fear, so that now it's like any little thing that you seem to say, anyone can point to, or Zionists can point to in this country and say that you're being anti-Semitic. And people are getting to the point where they feel like they have to walk around on eggshells to comfort a group that is not oppressed. And you have organizations in this country right now that is trying to make it so that, or give the impression that they are the most oppressed people right now. But number one, they're not oppressed at all. And then number two, like, this is what I meant when I said during that segment that we have to look at positions of power. And the question I've been asking myself, especially going into 2025, who is challenging power and who is in power? And those who are in power, those who have the power, cannot be oppressed. Those of us who are not in positions of power, which is the majority of us around here, we are the ones that now have to walk around on eggshells. So when you say that you would engage, I would not even engage. I would say that that might be what they want you to do. They may want you to engage so that you can say something, slip up and say something, and they'll say, oh, that's anti-Semitic. Next thing you know, you got things out against you. So I think that's the difference. I would not engage at all.
I see. But for me, I must say, because you got people dying, the need for organization, the need for truth telling, 99.9% of my energy has always gone into trying to ensure that the voices of poor people and working people, and especially Black people, is heard. And that's not a question of whether I'm going to be engaging people who support genocide, because I don't have time for the most part of doing that. If that option is there, it might be one. But this talk about shunning as if it's a major issue at a moment when people are being murdered and massacred and so forth, and the need for courageous witness, that for me is the priority. That's what I mean by starting with one's love for oppressed people, and that being the priority, rather than whether some strategy of shunning folk who are supporting genocide is something that we ought to spend a whole lot of time on. If you, for example, were a student and you said, Brother West, I'm shunning so-and-so, I said, well, that's your decision. I don't think everybody needs to do the same thing. I don't think everybody needs to do what I do. That's your decision. But the important thing is, Sister Sabby, on Thursday afternoon, we're trying to revive these encampments. We're trying to make sure that Palestinian students are empowered. We're trying to make sure that Black students and others, and Jewish Voices for Peace too, we want to include them in terms of their courage and what have you. We need to take time and priority to make sure that our organizations, which are being devastated right now, lied on, vilified, attacked, and so forth and so on, that's the priority. And you got to remember, when I got pushed out of Harvard, what was the issue? It was
Israel.
a Palestinian issue.
Yeah.
Right? That was years and years ago. How many folk came to my defense? Very, very few. That's fine. I mean, I'm not worried about that, but my priorities were where they belonged. I didn't get pushed out because he's kumbaya. No, not whatsoever. And not only that, but just being a black person, because as you know, you and I are asked all the time, right? Well, where are the Palestinian voices for black people? Come on, Brother West. How come you and Chris Smalls and them sacrificing so much and spending all this time for Palestinians, and we don't see the Palestinian voices or a lot of Middle Eastern voices? That's true for Iranians. That's true for Turks, and so forth. Where are those voices for black folk? I get that all the time in churches. I get that all the time in black community hall. And I tell them what? I'm a love warrior. As a Christian, I love black people indeed, but I love all oppressed people. So it's not quid pro quo. I don't have to wait for Palestinian voices to be strong for black people, for me as a black man to be in solidarity with them. I'm in solidarity with oppressed people no matter who they are. I'm in solidarity with trans as a straight brother. Why? For me, it's out of deep solidarity and love for them. So that in that sense, that's on the ground, serious kind of challenges that we have. And in a fascist moment, oh my God, when the fascism is intensifying every day, I was telling Noam, I said, I just don't think shunning is going to be a major focus here, given what we're up against. But at the same time, I'm always going to be honest and candid in terms of where I'm coming from.
Well, I did speak up when you, with the Harvard situation.
Yes, you did.
I did
Yes,
speak up
you did.
against
And
I remember that.
so.
And that's why I was surprised with your comment to Norm Finkelstein, because I remember what happened there, what you went through. I know how Harvard can be. And I think that people were surprised. And it just, to me, and this is the example that I want to use, because I know this was a long time ago, but I want to put this up here. I can't play it because of copyright, but I want to put this up there to prove a point. Years ago, there was a conversation with you and other professionals on the Phil Donahue show.
1990.
Phil Donahue, there it is. Phil Donahue, for those who are not aware, Phil Donahue brought conversations onto his show during a time when some of those conversations were not popular to be had. He lost his show, from what I understand, because he was against the war in Iraq. So he took positions at that time that were not popular to take. But you had a conversation on the Phil Donahue show, and there was a back and forth between you and Sister Soldier. This is Sister Soldier here. She's also a writer. She does engagements every now and then. I think she just did like a talk in a couple of places. And this comes up a lot, Dr. West. I know Dana with the data, she did a really good breakdown of this. So shout out to her for that. And she brought up this question. We have to start asking about inclusion. And the reality is that I go back to that back and forth between you and Sister Soldier. And I think what Sister Soldier was trying to say is that sometimes you cannot coexist with certain people. Sometimes, like, people have to prove that they are an ally first. And it sounded like, to me, you wanted to just try to like work with everybody. And what Sister Soldier is speaking from her direct experience. She was saying like, no, they have to show that they're allies first. You said it a little bit a while ago. You were talking about the people, you got to give people a chance to change. And I told you that if they wanted to in Israel, they have opportunity to do that, and they have chose not to. They continue to follow Zionism, which is a racist supremacist ideology. And going back to that show, Sister Soldier was saying, where are these so-called allies? I would like to meet them because they are far and few. And this is the point that I'm trying to bring home. When I say we need a radical form of politic, that means that we are at a point right now where we cannot take the MLK approach and continue to say we're going to sit in the room with said group and we're going to hear each other out. We're past that point. That's what I'm saying. And I know that that may sound extreme to some, but there is an actual genocide happening. And what I fear is that because it has been going on for so long, it's been over 2 years now, I fear that people are getting to the point where they are not affected or impacted by the images that they see of the children being torn apart, physically torn apart. They're not affected or impacted the way that they were in the beginning of all of this, which means that it is becoming normalized. And that is what I fear. And I feel like the only way to disrupt that normalization is a radical form of politic. And to me, that radicalism is not trying to engage with racist Zionists, is not trying to hear them out or hear their side of the point. I have watched multiple debates, whether it's been on Pierce Morgan, Jubilee, TYT, etc., where they have come on and they continue to spread lies just to say that, hey, we're in the right here. They continue to lie and lie and lie. So that is what I'm saying. And I'm also curious, if you had the opportunity to talk to Sister Soldier again, would you be interested in doing that?
Oh my God, yeah, she's my dear sister. I've written blurbs for her books. I run into her. We have wonderful conversations. She's quite a novelist. She was with Public Enemy at that time, and even after we had that dialogue, we had one. So no, she. The thing is, when you're part of the same community of struggle, when you're part of the same resistance with a variety of different voices and viewpoints, right? That you have a connection. It cuts different. It's like yourself and myself. You see, when I say sister to you, it's not just in that Christian sense, but it's comrade, which is much deeper, right? Because but comrade means you're part of the same resistance movement, even as you have disagreements. That's the way it is with me and Sister Soldier for 30 some years. And she's been strong. Very, very strong. And we still have our disagreements, but we got some very deep commonalities in terms of our willingness to sacrifice. But even when you say with Martin saying, well, he's peaceful, want to meet in the room, the brother goes to jail for 31 times and he dies at 39. That doesn't sound like he's just going into rooms and meeting with folk and engaging with folk because he refuses to shun. That's not kumbaya at all. That's a love of the people that is based on a witness that has a different kind of twist, no doubt, than, let's say, a Frantz Fanon. See, Frantz Fanon say, come on, Martin. You not only just pull out your gun, but let's start shooting. Martin say, I understand why. I know, in fact, that you have a context that is qualitatively different than the Ku Klux Klan or the IDF or American Army vis-a-vis the Vietnamese and so forth. No doubt about that. But that doesn't mean you push Martin out of the movement just because he's willing to go to jail 31 times and be assassinated, and yet he's a pacifist. We just have a disagreement with the pacifism. But the underlying love he has for the people is what brings folk together. And that's why when you mention Sister Soldier, my heart leaps for joy. Good gosh, she's my comrade and will always be my sister in that regard. And that's true for you as well, even though we got our disagreements now. Ain't no doubt about that. But my respect for you is still untarnished because I know your love is real. But I can tell you this, there's some people who say similar things that you say who are really not for real. They're just playing a game, you see. And those are the ones that I distinguish between you and some of the others. And so when I bring critique to bear on some of the progressives that are not consistent enough to follow through on talking about genocide, follow through and talking about black people mass incarcerated, follow through on the vicious attacks on black folk taking place, you say, hey, wait a minute. I was reading the New Yorker just the other day with Brother Remnick, who's the editor, been editor for 20 some years. And he talks about those groups that are targeted by the Trump administration. Doesn't even mention black people. You got media executives, universities, librarians. Yes, we want to defend all of those. But this is an attack on black folk, white supremacist legacy. The legacy of white supremacy is operating intensely under this version of American fascism under Trump. And where's the stress on the attack on black people? Not only that, where's the stress on the black voices that are resisting? If somebody were to write a mainstream history of resistance to Trump, there would hardly even be any black voices, because the very framework itself is already too narrow and racist. You got a lot of black voices out there that are resisting your voices and others. Are they given prominence? No. What we've been trying to do with Tavis's show in 1580, we talk about genocide all the time. Are those voices accented? No. Why? Because the framework itself is so tied to corporate sensibilities, corporate profits, mainstream lens, and so forth and so on. So we had to fight on a number of different fronts. And in some ways, it goes back to where we started, which is Garvey saying, "Up, you mighty folk, you can do what you will." Of course, we believe in solidarity, but it's got to be a real solidarity. It can't be window dressing.
So then I guess, what would you say? Because I know that Norm Finkelstein wrote a letter. I mean, what would you say about that conversation in particular?
Oh, I mean, it's
Do you
fascinating.
feel as though we misunderstood?
I think so. And I think Brother Norm would say the same thing too, that, you know, for him, he thought that the folk, they pick out certain 1 or 2 minutes, you know, it went on for 3 hours, and life is too short to hear me and Norm go for 3 hours. I understand that. But people pick out 2 minutes and don't say a mumbling word about the rest. They didn't say anything about my grandfather, right? Nobody knows about my grandfather, who picked up his gun when my mother's mother died on the steps of a hospital because the white supremacist hospital would not allow her, and had to do with a tooth that was falling out. She died right there on the steps. He was a deacon and missionary, Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church, pulled his gun out looking for the folk. The church folk got him. They ran him out of town. And I told Norman, I said, now see, Big Daddy, Christian to the core, not a follower of Martin Luther King Jr. pacifism, he acted on what he believed. So when Norm was talking about this, I said, okay, if you're willing to act on it, then it has an authenticity about it. There's no doubt about it. He was telling the story about his mother. When they saw the person they thought who killed the folk in the concentration camp, the Nazi concentration camp. And I turned to him and I said, so what did you do? Granddad got his gun. The granddad would be the first to say, nah, I'm not sure I was being fully Christian, but I think I could have been Christian, but I was being human. That was my wife, and your mother, Cornel, was 2 years old when she died. I have a respect for Big Daddy, even if I disagree with a particular strategy that he might have at that moment, as did most of the folk in the church. If it were to happen to me, shoot, I'd probably get my gun too. I'm a human being. I believe in self-defense. But that doesn't mean that I believe either in a kumbaya strategy and I'm violating, or it doesn't mean that I want to justify hatred. I can hate the sin and try to stay in contact with the humanity of the sinner, because the sinner can change. Because you can have folk coming out of Israel who have been brainwashed, and as they get de-gangsterized and find out truths, they reject Zionism and become strugglers, fighters for freedom as Israelis. You know stories about that as well, right? That's a human thing. People do change. But change, if that sort, is not a political strategy. It's not a political strategy, but it is a reality in the lives of people.
But I think there's a difference between sinning and genocide. There's no remorse there. There's no remorse with the babies, the kids that are being blown up, killed, starved to death. There's no remorse.
But we black folk have had the same thing done to us. We've been dealing with genocide-like conditions for 400 years, my dear sister. It's not like this is new for the black freedom struggle at all. And sin, it depends on how you define sin. Sin is not just a personal offense. Sin is greed and hatred conjoined in order to thoroughly crush precious human beings. And that's what white supremacy has been. And that's why white supremacy is an integral part of fascism, not just in the United States, but the anti-Palestinian racism, fundamental core of Zionist practice. So I'm not sure how you juxtaposing sin versus genocide.
They want the extermination of an entire group of people.
Yes, that's true. That is sin on steroids. That's right. I mean, theologically speaking, that's sin on steroids.
But this is
Absolutely.
why I say, so do you think that Palestinian Americans should engage with Zionists? Do you think they should be open to that conversation?
You mean just any kind of conversation anywhere?
Well, in the
I
same
don't understand.
respect of the conversation that you and Norm Finkelstein had, do you
Right,
think that
right.
Palestinian Americans should engage with Zionists?
I think Palestinian Americans ought to make their own choices in terms of how they pursue their self-determination and self-defense and self-respect, so that some will choose to engage in conversations with Zionists. I'm sure some will. Some won't. That's fine, but that's not my fundamental focus. My focus right now is how do you stop the genocide? And you stop the genocide by telling the truth and trying to convince people to be courageous enough to organize and bring power and pressure to bear for the genocide taking place.
So I don't think that Palestinian Americans should engage with Zionists.
But but
I
but
don't
you,
think they should
but you and I don't need to be telling Palestinians what to do, though,
That's
sister.
true. That's
You know
that's
what I
true.
mean?
That is true. But
Yeah.
I just I
They coming to me. Somebody telling me, well, as a black man, you don't need to be engaging with talk with white folk. Hey, I'm a free black man. I might agree with you, but that ain't a proper way of talking to me. You know what I mean? You a free black woman thinking for yourself.
right. I if someone were to ask me, I would say, well, no,
But I
because
understand. I understand. I mean, I thoroughly understand. But what I don't want, though, is this. I know I don't want to go on in this, but I just don't want these kinds of things to get in the way of the things that you and I and many, many others have in common that are much more important at this fascist moment as we try to generate different forms of resistance. That's the important thing. So that kind of seeking and truth telling you're talking about and justice seeking that you're talking about, when they come together in a powerful way. When we have disagreements about this particular strategy of a shunning X and a shunning Y, see, you can't allow your foes or your enemies ever to be your major focus, or when you become parasites on their host. What we focus on primarily is how do we galvanize and mobilize the courage, integrity, love, determination, organization of hated, terrorized, and traumatized people. That is what you focus on. And that's a whole lot to focus on. You know that. You've been doing that for a long, long time now. No doubt about that. And so when it comes to, well, are you going to engage with white folks? You going to engage with designers? You going to engage with patriarchs? You going to engage with homophobes? Well, different people might have different ways in which they're going about it. But most importantly, they're coming together to fight against these evils. That's the crucial thing. Does
Dr.
that make
West,
sense to
I
you?
I disagree. We'll just continue. We'll
Oh,
just
you
agree
still
to
disagree with that?
disagree.
You
We'll
still
just
disagree? You still
we'll just
disagree?
we'll just agree to disagree. I don't know, Dr. West. Maybe I'm looking at it this way too, and I'm thinking, I wonder if maybe it's a generational thing. I don't know. But I
Yeah,
just don't.
yeah.
I just I just can't. I just can't. And the things that I have seen and the things that are still happening, I I disagree with you on this particular point here. And
Would you disagree that we need to make it a priority to focus on oppressed peoples and their resources and energies as opposed to a strategy like shunning? You think a strategy like shunning is important enough to take us away from our priority of focusing on oppressed people's
I
energy?
think I think it's an effective tool. I think it's an effective
Okay.
tool
You
that
said a
can be used.
tool that does empower oppressed people.
Right. Right.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, I got you. So in that sense, we are agreeing in terms of the priority. You just saying it's a tool that will reinforce the priority of energizing oppressed people, so that shunning could be a way in which it enables, it strengthens oppressed. Oh no, okay, well that's. I'm glad we got. I knew we wrestled with this long enough. We need to get at this stuff, definitely. But I don't know if it's generation. It could be. It could be. You know, it could be. And I can tell you this too, that I could be wrong. Now I don't. I believe in human fallibility. That I actually could be wrong. There are people of my own generation that would disagree with me as well, and I'm sure there's people of your generation who would disagree with you as well. But it could be partly generational too. But most importantly, it's a matter of us being true to ourselves, because you have to be the strongest that you can be as Sister Sabby, love warrior, freedom fighter. I got to be true in terms of who I am as Brother West, and what's gone into the making of Sabby, what's gone into the making of Cornel is going to be similar and different at the same time.
All right, Dr. West, thank you so much for your time. Before you go, anything that you have coming up?
Good God Almighty. That's a good question, though. No, if people want to hear what I have to say, they can hear me on Brother Tavis Smiley show every Monday and Thursday at the second hour. Radio talk show 1580. For 6 months, I had this wonderful show with Nina Turner. We had a magnificent time together for 6 months, did over 100 shows. And now that I'm with Tavis just those 2 days of the week, we are hitting it hard, making a connection between the genocide in Gaza and the mass incarceration and unemployment and white supremacist attacks from the fascist administration of Trump in the United States, so that the domestic and the international is always interwoven. It could be with Haiti, it could be Sudan, it could be with Gaza, but it also connects to what's happening on the ground with poor people, with Black people, with working people.
All right, Dr. West, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the time. You stay strong. Take good care now.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.